You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, listeners. I'm your host, Kristen Civiletto, and we're thrilled that you're tuning in from 105 countries and territories, all 50 states. And we know why. It's because we're bringing you some of the very best authors that are writing today. Today's no exception. We have internationally best-selling author Lynn Cullen. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, we're excited because we're here to talk about your new book, When We Were Brilliant. And you can see from this beautiful, beautiful cover, it's a novel about Marilyn Monroe. And we're going to dive in deep to that. But I thought first I would tell our listeners a little bit more about your background. First of all, I love the fact that your books have been translated into 17 languages, sold in places throughout the world, and you have received many honors. Some of these are so awesome. NPR Great Read, ALA Best Book of the Year, Oprah Book of the Week, People Magazine Book of the Week, and the Indie Next Selection. And we know why your books, I could tell you spent so much time thinking about them and researching them, but really, you could just crawl in and spend a lot of time with you in these books. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, the one that we're going to start with today is, as I showed this, When We Were Brilliant. And I want to just ask you before we get started about it, because I understand you always kind of start your stories with a question. And what was the question in this story?
Well, the very earliest question before I even thought about this particular book is, who was Marilyn Monroe? I really have been fascinated by her since I was a little kid. I remember seeing her for the first in the 7-Year Itch when I was 8 years old. And I loved her, but I also worried about her. There was something, all the men and everybody was after her, and she just somehow escaped everybody's clutches so lightly. But she worried me, and she also made me think, is this how it is for women? I mean, she really got me thinking. She's always meant a lot to me. So as the years went on and I became a writer, my way of understanding people and events, situations, is to write about them. And so I did want to write about her, but I had to find a unique way in, because we know there are many books written about her. And so it just occurred to me a couple of years ago, well, what about the women photographers? Because I know that her photographs are really what made her. And so what about the women photographers? And I was shocked to find out that there was only really one woman to photograph her, Eve Arnold. And so as I got to know them and their relationship that took a long time to develop, I asked, what was it about them that when Marilyn died, Eve Arnold had all these photographs of Marilyn, and a Marilyn that no one has ever seen before. Her photographs are so different when you compare them to the other photographers. And I thought, what was it that made Eve, who evidently was so close to Marilyn, sit on these pictures for 25 years? Why would she not show them to anybody? And so I was trying to answer that. It opened a lot of different doors, but that was the question that really I had to figure out and wrote the book around.
All right. Well, that's a great backdrop because I want to tell our listeners a little bit about the story that did unfold in your story. And of course, I won't give anything away inappropriately. But here we start out in 1952 when Marilyn and Eve cross paths, in fact, in a powder room. And, you know, Marilyn, and she's also known, of course, as Norma Jean Baker, she saw something in Eve that she wanted to work with her. And we're going to get into some of the why and what was going on there. But I love the fact that she approached Eve and wanted her to photograph her. And at first, Eve wanted to be known for her serious subjects. I mean, she's a woman who is a female photojournalist, and this is very unusual at the time. But
Mhm.
over time, they bumped into each other a few more times. They had some interactions. And I love that your story is a very slow pacing. We get to know both of these women as the story unwinds. And of course, as Marilyn Starr takes off and she becomes this iconic person and character that we know now, we see where Eve also had tremendous success as a photojournalist. So that's kind of the setting for your story.
Yes. There's a lot to unpack there. Where do you want to start?
Yeah.
Because
All right.
that was a lot. And that's,
Yeah.
yes, it's really what I grappled with as I was writing the book.
Excellent. Well, let me ask you this then.
Okay.
First of all, the Marilyn Monroe persona, how was that different from Norma Jean Baker?
A lot different. And I think that was back to how you started your question. That was really one of the reasons I think that Eve Arnold appealed to Marilyn, because Eve was photographing already. She was getting a reputation for photographing uh, a side of people that nobody had seen before. She was fresh off of photographing Marlene Dietrich. And, you think no big surprise that she, photographed her at work. She was singing in a studio. And, to us, that's no big deal. But back then in 1952, there were not these shots of movie stars, at work or at home, or they're all very staged, and they were always in studios. So Eve Arnold was doing something completely new, and that was just using whatever the available daylight was, and no retakes, no touching up, just whatever she could capture with the available lighting. And that alone makes people look different. But that Marlene Dietrich spread, I think was it in Life magazine or Look? Anyhow, it was huge because it was so new. And that's why Marilyn approached Eve in this bathroom at a club that they were at a party for John Huston, the director. Anyhow, she approached her and said, I saw what you did for Marlena, and she wanted it for herself. And she said, and think what I could do for you, which is really interesting about Marilyn. She didn't have enough confidence to just ask for something. This was so Marilyn or Norma Jean. She always said, think what I could do for you. It's always like, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. It was never just, we're friends, let's do this. It was like, I can do this for you. And so this is how she approached Eve. And Eve, just kind of thought, what can this starlet do for me? Because in 52, Marilyn was starting to take off, but she was not the subject that Eve wanted. Eve wanted a more serious subject. I think you touched on that. And she wanted, not Marilyn Monroe, not somebody known just to be sexy. So she was a hard sell, but she finally did break down. And very quickly, for some reason, Marilyn from the very start trusted Eve and lit out her Norma Jean side, who was, as we say, totally different. She didn't talk like with that, lispy, sweet little voice. She had a regular voice, and she didn't mince around. She didn't throw her chest forward. And this is what Eve always said when Marilyn saw a camera, not her own, but when she saw a camera. So Eve always kind of rolled her eyes at whenever Marilyn saw any other camera than hers. She would throw out her chest and throw out her rear and become Marilyn. She actually put on this Marilyn persona. I mean, literally put it on. And Marilyn claimed that she could walk around New York City and nobody would pay any attention to her if she didn't put on her Marilyn persona. And in real life, she actually showed Eve that she could just go around as Norma Jean and no one would look at her, which is pretty amazing, that she's the
Yeah.
same person. And in fact, Eve recounted in real life several times when people would, like, they'd be in a taxi cab and the cab driver would say, you look a lot like Marilyn Monroe, but I know you can't be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all just a matter of what Marilyn brought forth.
Yeah.
But that was not the girl inside. And this is one of the reasons I so adore Norma Jean is she was she came from nothing, um, less than nothing. She was in many foster homes, in an orphanage. Her mother had schizophrenia, and she just had no one to love her. And here she made this persona that everybody loved. I think it's just amazing. It took a lot out of her. It took everything out of her,
Yeah.
but she imagined this and created it
Yeah.
for herself.
And used Eve in some respects to build that persona. And I wanted to ask you if you thought that that Marilyn Monroe persona almost overshadowed the men in her life, even maybe Eve's work. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, I think when it came to Eve's work, Eve even admitted this, and her grandson and I have talked about it, um, that Eve was really conflicted about Marilyn because whenever Eve would have an interview, they always wanted to know, what about your Marilyn pictures? And here Eve was like one of the first photographers in China. This is how she won the National Book Award, is her photos of China. And, she just photographed everybody, and just in such a unusual, fantastic way. She was in all the magazines around the world, that, big magazines, but yet when she was interviewed, it's always like, what about Marilyn?
Yeah.
And so that gave me a lot to think about as I was writing. And really, that's how I ended up with the climax of the book, is how Eve dealt with that, the realization about if that was a good thing or a bad thing for her.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fascinating. I learned so much reading this book, but it was also entertaining. It's not like, a nonfiction book. This is a fantastic weaving in of all of these facts.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
Now, as we've been talking about it, we know that you were really exploring the relationship between these two women. And what I was really interested in is the fact that both of these women used the camera in some respects to hide their true self. And I wanted to ask you about this because one was behind the camera and one's in front of the camera. But
Mhm.
do you think that Eve's work unintentionally exposed their true selves just because of the eye that she had or how she went about things? What do you think?
I don't think it was unintentional.
Mm.
Eve had this very unique gift that she relaxed people, and they would give themselves. She always just said, I just let people give me whatever they want to give me.
Yeah.
And she was there open for them. And I think people want to be seen. Even even if they're afraid of that, I think we all have that yearning to be seen. And that really was why I think Marilyn chose Eve. She could see that Eve brought this out. And as I said, put these words in Marilyn's mouth in the book, is I want to I want to know myself. I want to see myself. I don't know myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she really meant that, because, like I said, she came from such a empty background. She was just scrambling to know herself, and here was this way, Eve. And indeed, I don't know that Marilyn was like, here is Eve, or here is Norma Jean, but she did come out, and it is back to how Eve just, I don't know, she's just this conduit.
Yeah, it's just that almost that intentionality of Marilyn wanting to reveal something to Eve, but also I really, and this is my opinion, I also think that Marilyn wanted Eve to see something of herself from behind that camera and knew that these pictures would do that. I feel like Marilyn was very intelligent woman, very
Yeah,
intelligent. And
I think
she
so
was
too.
thinking on those different levels with Eve. Do you agree?
Uh, yes, because Marilyn is surprisingly deep and intelligent, and she
Yeah.
got ribbed a lot about when she would try to have, if she would have questions or if she sounded intelligent, people gave her such a hard time about that. And she had no, you know, education. She was self-educated, but
Mhm.
she really, really wanted to learn, and I think she could be insightful. She was very, you know, very unstable, and so she couldn't always be seeking all the time because she was dealing with her problems, and she had health problems too, as the book points out a lot that she had dealt with those. But I think that she really cared for Eve. You could tell by what she gave to Eve. And I didn't realize this until, I was writing the book. Again, I write books to understand that Eve was really, I think she was kind of terrified to show herself. Here she's letting everybody be seen,
Yeah.
and it was terrifying for her to be seen. She wanted to do the revealing and not be revealed, but
Yes.
but her photographs revealed her.
Yes.
And to your point, I think Marilyn really wanted this for her.
Yeah. Well, I would love to dive a little deeper into Eve because she fascinates me too. So does Marilyn, but Eve as well, because, she is a towering figure in real life. And a lot of people aren't familiar with her. But during the 50s and the 60s, when few women entered journalism, let alone photojournalism, there she was and
Hmm.
seeking after some of these big, big assignments. But she
Yes.
had to juggle motherhood, being a wife, as well as her career. And she had to make a lot of choices that were very painful and had a detrimental impact on her family. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that because, you know, she didn't necessarily conform to what society would have expected of her.
Right.
Right.
Um, just, the way I mostly educated myself on Eve was reading her books. She wrote many uh, different books. They were her photographs, or the photographic books, but she always has all this text in there. Like the one that really inspired this book is when I got hold of her book called Marilyn Monroe, which they just recently reprinted, and you could just follow along my book by looking at these photos in this book
Yeah.
because that's how I based them. But she she revealed herself as this, she revealed the struggles she had, and you could see that she loved her son,
Yeah.
and it was so hard for her to leave him. It was a real decision. And I thought that when I ran across that remark that Robert Capa's mother made, is that you are the world's. You don't belong to yourself. When you have this kind of talent, you're not yours. You're the world's. And I think when Eve realized that, it helped her to understand why she had to keep leaving her family. But did it make it easier? Probably not, because it hurts. It hurts, when you have to give up this one side of you like she did. Because her assignments did take her afar, and back then you couldn't just zip here and back as quickly. Everything took a little longer, and whatever, she was gone a lot, and her marriage was destroyed, and um, and that's another thing that her fellow photographers at Magnum, which is the big photo agency, said, "Oh, photographers don't stay married. They don't go hand in hand. It's just,
Yeah.
too demanding of a job." But
Yeah.
yet,
And it's
she was called. That's the problem. This was her vocation. There's nothing she could do about that. She would have to do this. I think it would be wrong of her, but poor her, because she
yeah.
knew she had to do this, that this is what was needed in the world, and yet her family paid the price.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how so many of the themes in this story resonate with us today. As women, as people in the limelight. I mean, it really could it be today's issues as far as a lot of times we see famous people withdrawing because,
Yeah.
it's hard to handle that spotlight. And also juggling family and being a mother and wanting to pursue a career. So that's why I think this book is so wonderful on so many levels. But I want to ask you about something else, though. Um,
Okay.
there's Eve always waited to capture a very decisive moment with her subjects. And as soon as a truth is revealed, she would snap that picture. And she always called it an oop moment because a mentor had said that to her at one point. But
Mm-hmm.
she had a knack for seeing those oop moments. And I was wondering, do you think that sometimes we get that privilege today as people interacting with other people where we get a little glimpse of who they truly are? And it's almost like a gift in some respects, don't you think?
When you have that with people,
Yeah.
yes, you have a very good point. It's kind of rare, and
Yeah.
and there's some people you probably will never have it with. And so the people that you come across and you don't even know them, but you have a moment where your souls kind of talk, which
Yeah.
sounds, goofy, but it's true. And
Yeah.
there's no denying, there's a few people you just like, wow, we clicked. And,
No
here's
pun
Eve.
intended.
Yeah, with Eve, she definitely clicked. Um, but yeah, and just think that's what she made a life of. But I sort of I'm going for that when I write because it took me 3 years to write this book. I wish I could write books more quickly. I really, really do, but I'm a slow writer, and there's so many days that are not brilliant, not fun. But there are some days where there's something, it's that same sort of magic that you get when you click with someone. There's just some magic. It's like, who wrote that? I
Yeah.
didn't write that. That's what is that? And so I live for those moments. They're moments of truth. Maybe all this boils down to is just moments of pure truth. The truth
Yeah.
that you see in someone, maybe some idea I had seemed really true.
Yeah.
But it's what we live for. And
Yeah.
maybe because we can't experience it every day is why it's special and you notice it, which brings me to another thing. I've lived long enough. I remember when I was younger, when we did something really great, traveled, or um, I had a really cool experience with writing or whatever. And I always thought, oh, I'm going to do that again. And I have learned you never do it again. It's
Yeah.
never like that. You could go back to the same place, you could see the same people, I could write the same thing. You never pass that way again. And so that makes it even more precious. And so
Yeah.
now it even gets me when I'm having these moments, I'm thinking, oh, shoot, I'm never going to experience this again. But, at least we have those moments.
Well, like the camera and Eve's work, this book reveals so much about you as well. And I can appreciate that about you, that curiosity that drove you in the first place to dive so deep, but also that attention to detail and the emotional moments of connection. And that's very evident in your story. And I suspect that's also very much who you are.
That is
Yeah.
important to me.
Yeah.
It really is. And understanding people, like
Yeah.
just going for those moments of understanding and curiosity. I realized as I was writing that book, oh my gosh, I am Eve. I
Yeah.
related to her so much, and I know her
Yes.
main thing, what drove her forward was curiosity. And I always think I wish all of us could have that because it does keep you alive. Having just that sense of wonder and curiosity. I mean, that is one of the most fun things about life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to show our listeners this beautiful cover, When We Were Brilliant. And I won't say too much about the title because I think it's something that unfolds across the story. But I hope that everybody runs out and reads this book. It is fantastic. And it's a
Thank
book to
you.
be savored. And also, what I love too is that we are immersed in this time period with attitudes towards women and how the men and the lives of both of these women reacted to their success. So again, it resonates so much with things that we struggle with today. So I just love it.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell our listeners too how to find you because you have a beautiful website with all of your books that are up there and lynncullen.com. I know you're on Facebook and on Instagram. And I have just loved talking to you about this story. And I hope that you come back in the future. I know it might be
Oh,
another 3 years. I hope not.
I will come back whenever you like. So, and thanks so much for having me. This has really been fun.
Absolutely. Would you want to share, by the way, anything that might be coming down the pipe, or do you have,
I'm
you're
not,
focused on this book for right now?
I'm always looking at other books because I feel like if I'm not writing, I am really, really uncomfortable, really
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So I'm
Yeah.
always looking at the next book all along. But I'm not far along enough with the next one to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it, but I'm afraid I'll just make it die.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm a little early. Thank you for asking, though, because I love to talk about, books as I'm working on them, but I'm not far enough along.
Awesome. That's okay. Well, we would love to see you in the future, and we wish you all the best with When We Were Brilliant. It's wonderful, and we're just so grateful for you coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, Bookstorm podcast listeners, what a wonderful, wonderful discussion with Lynn. She thinks so deeply about her books. It is absolutely evident in this one. And for anybody who, you think Marilyn Monroe or you think Eve Arnold, for those of you who are aware of who she is, but this book goes that much deeper and makes these connections that are so interesting. There's just so much to think about in this one. We loved it. So I want to tell our listeners how to get in touch with us because we can be found on bookstormpodcast.com, Instagram, on X, on YouTube. We continue to grow every week, so we really appreciate you sharing those links. And who do we have coming up? Susan Mallory with Otherwise Engaged. We have Ryan Steck and Simon Gervais with The Second Son, Liza Palmer, Young Fools, Brad Meltzer, The Viper, James Grippando, The Right to Remain, Allison Brennan, Make It Out Alive, Brooke Fast, To Cage a Wild Bird, Caitlin Rother with Hooked, Kate White, I Came Back for You, Mariah Blake, They Poisoned the World, and so many more that aren't even on this list. We're running out of room. But we know why you're coming back time and again, listeners. It's because your favorite authors are here on Bookstorm Podcast.